Erev Tov, good evening. Jeff, was anyone on the Zoom with you? Were you on another Zoom? I had to end a chat to start this one. Sorry, you're on mute.
Yeah, no, it must. Maybe I was with the. Did you have Zoom on the previous year? I went into meeting room 1 and then wasn't getting anywhere. So then I left that and joined this.
Okay. So where is everyone else? We have a trio in the room, so at least we're on.
I think Alex is away.
Alex away. So Vicky's.
Yeah,
Baruch Hashem. I know that's like your makom kavod now. It's all good. Okay. So we're going to start with, I don't know if I can call it executive decision if I made it exclusively, but I think we're going to move on to the beginning of Perek, the beginning of chapter 7. Do you have the page number? 243, page 243. And anyone who wants to learn rest of Hilchot Ereva is welcome to read up on what we didn't finish last time, but I think we discussed it. Very revealing, right? Great revelations. Okay. L'chaim, and virtual L'chaim to Jeff, who's on Zoom. Okay. Beseder. So what we're going to talk about today is this Hilchot Zman Kriyat Shema. I think the exact times for when it is we can recite Kriyat Shema. Okay. So on page 243. Hello, Debbie. Welcome. Page 243. We're going to now look at the new chapter on the Zmanim, the times. When is the correct time for reciting Kriyat Shema in the mornings?
This is what we have to teach the 6:30 minyan.
This is the difficult bit. What you have to discuss with the 6:30 minyan?
Yeah, that's what I mean.
Well, we know obviously there's got to be a beginning time to Kriyat Shema and an end time to Kriyat Shema. And we're going to discuss both of those in the course of today's shiur. So on page 243. So this actually is already discussed in the Mishnah in the beginning of Masechet Brachot. We look in page 243, source 1, the Mishnah in Brachot says as follows. There are two opinions brought there basically in the Mishnah in source 1 on page 243. When do you read Shema in the morning? From when? From when? So when a person can distinguish, lahakir is to know, recognize, distinguish between tchelet, right? Tchelet, sky blue, right? And lavan and white. Why are those colors significant? Those are the colors on your tzitzit, right? Tchelet and lavan, tchelet and white. If you have tzitzit on properly, Michael. Rabbi Eliezer, I was quoting your father in the back of you. Rabbi Eliezer says, "Bein tchelet lekarti." No, not between tchelet and white, but between tchelet and what's karti? So some green, right? Karti is Aramaic for a leek. One of the simanim, one of the simanim that people have, the simanim on Rosh Hashanah, it's a leek. Krisha is a leek. Aramaic shin and taf are interchangeable. So karti, and what's the siman? I think we say yikartu sonenu, that they'll be cut off like karet, right? So karti is a leek. It's a leek green. So in other words, what does this mean? It means that when there's enough light, it's just a little bit light, that if I were to hold up in the dark a blue thread, a tchelet thread, and either a white thread, according to the first opinion, or karti, a greeny thread, I'd be able to tell the difference, distinguish the two, tell the two apart. Okay, that is really, sorry?
Green on the top and white down the bottom.
Leeks are green at the top, so we're talking about the green bit. Why is this important? Well, firstly, obviously, tchelet versus lavan is an earlier time. To see a dark color versus a white color will be a few minutes earlier. You can distinguish different shades of dark, will be earlier than two dark colors. So that's important. But they represent two different time slots. It's the earliest time. So talking about when it's not quite light yet, but it's some light, but not very much light. That's the earliest time of Shema. But what on earth are these times and how do we quantify them? So let's look down. If we look at the Yerushalmi in source 2, the Yerushalmi has a different way of quantifying the times and brings different examples. And the Gemara in the Bavli will also bring different examples to exactly what this earliest time is for Shema. So if we look at source 2 in the Yerushalmi, Hu ba'i meimar, he wished to say, I think it says here, right, it's talking about Rav Chisda then the Gemara. Man demar, so in Aramaic of the Yerushalmi, they like to leave out even more aleph than the Bavli. So demar is just de amar, who said, right? So man demar, the one de amar who said, ben ze'ev lekelev. There's one opinion which says, how early is the time for Shema? that you can distinguish between a ze'ev and a kelef. You can tell the difference between a wolf versus a dog. And also, bein chamar la'arod, or between, what's a chamar? A donkey, and a rod? Sorry, it's like a wild donkey or a mule of sorts. Commander Amar is just like the one who says the difference bein techelet lekartan, between techelet and green, right? It's the same opinion. Otherwise, these are all just different simanim, different signs for the same type of light, same time of morning, basically. It's all just different. They didn't have fixed clocks. They're all using different simanim, different signs to tell the time of day.
Techelet in green is much harder to distinguish.
Right. Techelet versus green is a later time in the day than techelet and white. Because techelet and white, when it's still darker, you can tell the difference. Right. So this is like the second opinion in the Mishnah, that we saw that between blue and green, which obviously is slightly, to tell two dark threads apart, you need a little bit more light, so slightly later in the morning. So not when it's the first light, but a little bit after dawn. And the opinion which says, which you're going to see in the Gemara and the Bavli as well, that what is the earliest time for Shema? That if you're to see from 4 amot away, around 2 meters away, you were to see your friend, umakira, and recognize him, that's also a sign given. Command Amar ben Techelet lelavan. That is the same opinion, the same time, unit of time, as distinguishing between blue and white. The Gemara here is doing weird things and it's quantifying the various times. But again, in an era where you don't have a fixed clock, right, then they need some sort of siman in order to work out, well, how dark is dark and how light is light. And that's really what the Gemara is doing here. If we just go over the page, though, we'll see that the Gemara itself in source 3, in the Bavli, brings a whole range, an array, quoting some of those opinions in the Rishalmi, an array of opinions as to exactly what the earliest time is and exactly when this is. So let's look at source 3. This is going back to the Bavli now, the Gemara on the Mishnah. In source 3, the Gemara says, "My bein techelet lelavan." What is this time between that you can tell between techelet and white? What time? How light is that? If you're going to say it means bein gvava de amra chiyura, le gvava de amra de tchalta, it means between a pile of white wool and a pile of techelet wool. Not a lone string, but like a whole heap. If it's a huge thing, that you should be able to tell the difference even at night as well. In other words, even with really no light, you can tell the difference in terms of shade of a whole dark pile of wool versus a whole light pile of wool. Ella rather says the Gemara, no. Between the tchelet on your tzitzit and the lavan, the white strings on your tzitzit. Again, very clear what a Chazal doing here. They are making Kriyat Shema dependent on tzitzit and the zman and the relevance of tzitzit. If you can't see your tchelet on your tzitzit and you can't distinguish your tchelet on your tzitzit from the rest of your tzitzit, that cannot be the right time yet for reciting Shema. And that's what Chazal are doing here in using tchelet versus lavan as the siman, as the basic parameter for when the parameters as to when Shema, the obligation of Shema starts. When you can recognize the difference in your tzitzit, that is when the obligation of Shema starts, at that time of the morning. Now, when is this actually? When is Zman Kriyat Shema? Not the end of Zman Kriyat Shema, but the beginning of Zman Kriyat Shema. When is this typically? Sorry. So we have that. So 6:30 minyan. Went to the 6:30 minyan. Are they able to put on tefillin yet? Before they 6:42. That's Mantale to tefillin, right? Yeah. So that's sort of also similarly based on this time. So it's after dawn. Alot HaShachar is dawn, where there's the first bit of light over the horizon. So it's a few minutes after dawn, but before nates, before sunrise. So the sun, there's light going over the horizon, but the sun has not yet risen. It's in between the two, but it's closer to dawn. Sorry, Yishtabach.
So it's 13 minutes basically when they start.
So they do Yishtabach as Mantalit and tefillin, right? That's how they do it.
The Kahal does Yishtabach.
Hey, in England it was even worse. In England, sometimes Mantalit and tefillin was 7 o'clock. Sometimes you couldn't do Yishtabach till 7 o'clock. Sometimes in England, in the winter.
When did we lose the ability to discern Techelet? When did Techelet disappear?
Who said Techelet disappeared? I'm wearing some right now.
You were blue.
I'm wearing Techelet. I'm definitely wearing Techelet because they discovered lots of Murex trunculus all along the beach.
But it disappeared.
Well, we can discuss. It disappeared in the Gaonic period, so after the Gemara. After the Gemara was finished, somewhere between the Gemara and end of the Gemara and the Rishonim. So between the year 500 and 1000,
Yeah.
at some point it disappeared. Because we know already at the end of the Gemara times, they were still talking about Tchelet.
Yeah.
So that's when it was lost.
Mhm.
But again, what's the Gemara doing here? It's associating the obligation of Shema with the relevance of Tzitzit. Okay. Next paragraph is source 3. Tanya, we learn in a Braita. Rabbi Meir said, Mishayakir ben ze'ev lekelev. Right, this was an opinion which we saw in Rishalmi. When is the time for Kriyat Shema? When you can distinguish between a wolf versus a dog. Interesting. Rabbi Akiva says, Ben chamar la'arod, between a donkey and a wild donkey. V'acheirim omrim, and the opinion which is attributed to acheirim, which literally means others, they say, Mishayiret chavira rachok arba amot v'yakirenu. When you can see your acquaintance from 4 amot away, 2 meters away, and you can actually recognize him. If it's light enough that you can recognize somebody who you would recognize, that is the time for Shema. So how do we rule? How do we paskin? So Amar Rav Huna says, halacha ka'acheirim. Halacha follows acheirim. Namely, it's the time that you can recognize somebody from 4 amot away. Somebody who you know and you can recognize them.
But not know where. Like
So an acquaintance rather than a friend.
Yeah.
That's somebody who you might recognize if it with a bit of light. So that's the halacha. And we already saw in Yerushalmi that this time is synonymous with Tchelet and Lavan. That's because the two opinions put together. So 2 important things here. Number 1 is Amar Rav Huna. Rav Huna says halacha ka'acheirim. The halacha rules like acheirim. What is the unit of time? It's when you can recognize somebody from this distance. But Abaye comes and maybe disagrees with Rav Huna. We're going to have to understand if there's a machlokah here. Amar Abaye says Abaye, litfilin. We're on page 244 in the middle of the Gemara. When is the earliest time for Kriyat Shema in the morning? So Abaye says, so Rav Huna rules like acheirim, that the earliest time is when you can recognize somebody. Amar Abaye says, litfilin ka'acheirim. In terms of the first time, what we call zman tali to tefillin, that rules like acheirim, namely what we do today, what the time which is on the luach today, right? Whatever they do at the 6:30 minyan, 6:42, right? So today it'd be 6:42. So how like 10, 15 minutes after Alat HaShachar. But Kriyat Shema, for Kriyat Shema, Kavatikin. We don't rule like Acheirim for Zman Kriyat Shema, the earliest time Kriyat Shema. We write like Vatikin. What's Vatikin? Nates, right? Sunrise. The Amar Rabbi Yochanan, as Rabbi Yochanan had said, Vatikin, the Vatikin one, the pious ones, right, the early ones, the ancient ones, hayu gomrim ota im hanetzachama. They would finish Shema with sunrise. Why would they finish Shema with sunrise? So that they start Amida as the sun goes up. As the sun rises over the horizon, they would bow down and start their Amida. In other words, that the whole world, as the day dawns, right, the day starts, everyone is praising Hashem. So says Abaye here something important, that tefillin, we rule like acheirim, that it's this time between the amount of time you can recognize the acquaintance from 2 meters away. But when it comes to Vatikin, when it comes to Kriyat Shema, it's rather the halachas like Vatikin. When you're supposed to recite Shema, right before nates, right before sunrise. Now the question is Abaye disagreeing fundamentally with Rav Huna and saying the halacha is you have to recite Shema the latest? I mean, the earliest you can recite Shema is when right before sunrise, in which case we've got issue with the 6:30 minyan. We probably have an issue with the 7 o'clock minyan right now as well, because Nate's is 7:35 this week. Or, well, that's why the 7 o'clock minyan is struggling. Or, alternatively, dark humor, it's okay. Alternatively, dark humor, very good. Tarate mashbach, there we go. Alternatively, do we say that no, Abaye fundamentally agrees with Rav Huna that halacha is like acheirim. That what? That it's good enough from the time of what we call the time of talit and tefillin, but it's just a hidur, it's an enhancement, it's preferable to recite Shema right before Nate, because like the Vatikin did. In other words, does Abaye actually fundamentally disagree with Rav Huna, or is he just saying it's better to recite Shema right before Vatikin? So let's right before Nate's. Yeah. Yeah. Was that clear though? The question, the doubt as to what Abaye holds? Okay. Question, go for it. I'll just spin you so they can hear you as well.
The question is, are we talking about Kriyat Shema or are we talking about the actual Shema? Because we have brachot before Shema, we have Shema,
okay,
we have brachot after Shema.
Okay.
So are we talking about starting the brachot before Shema and then reading Shema at that exact time?
Mhm.
And then saying the brachot after Shema, so you can say
Okay.
Shmona Esrei at sunrise.
Right. Okay. So the ideal is we're talking about reciting Shema. The obligation of Shema means the 3 paragraphs.
Yeah.
When are the 3 paragraphs supposed to be recited? In the framework of the brachot before and after, right before Amida. So they would get to Ga'al Yisrael as the sun goes up,
Yeah.
right? Start their Amida. So they're saying Shema 5 minutes before.
Okay.
5 minutes before sunrise. That's what the Vatikin would do. And then that's what they do in a Vatikin minyan. You start Amida, you plan that your Amida starts when the sun goes up, when the sunrise. So you say, you get to Shema, 5 minutes before sunrise. So you finish Ga'al Yisrael, start Amida, Hashem Tivtach as the sun rises. The question is, which is an important one, is, well, what happens if you've got a minyan which is late, which we'll discuss? Then you have to recite your 3 paragraphs of Shema early, which happen all the time on Shabbos, right? If you go to the 9:30 minyan on Shabbos, well, depending, summer is easier, but oftentimes man creates Shema, even according to the more lenient opinion of the Gra, will be early, and you have to recite, especially on Shabbos. Unless you go to the Hashkama, you have to recite Shema, 3 paragraphs of Shema before you go to Shul. We will discuss though the question about late minyanim and like
Right.
Shabbat, for example.
Then does the Shema you say in brachot? Now, let's have the Shema.
Which Shema and Brachot? You mean what we say Mekadesh Shimcha Barabim in Korbanot?
Yeah.
So the reason that was enacted, a part of it is the Ramah says, we'll get to that hopefully if we get to it today, was that give you the opportunity to say all 3 paragraphs of Shema there. If you know that by the time you get to actual Shema, it's going to be after the Zman,
Yeah.
after the end, then it gives you an opportunity to actually recite it there. We'll get to that.
Okay.
But it's good, it's an important point. But we will get to that. It's a question of later minyanim. Okay. So let's just go over the page though, because it looks like that. Remember, there was a doubt as to what Abai held. Did Abai held fundamentally the time for Kriyat Shema is only right before sunrise, in which case our 6:30 minyan has a problem? Or is he just saying that's the Mahuda, right? That's the best way of doing it, like the Vatikin who would daven with sunrise. But strictly speaking, he agrees to Rav Huna that you can read already from the Zman of Tefillin and Talit, which is today 6:42. Okay. So look at the Rambam in source 4 on page 245. He seems to rule like the first version, that Abai fundamentally held you're supposed to read Shema Dafka the earliest time before Nates. Look in source 4. The Ezuhuz Mana Bayom. What is the time of Shema in the daytime Shema? Its mitzvah is Sheyatchil likrot kodem hanetz achama. You should read Shema right before sunrise. Today Sheyigmar likrot ulevarech bracha achrona im hanetz achama. So that you should finish it, right? And finish the last bracha Ga'al Yisrael, as you pointed out, as the sun rises. So you can start your Amida straight away as the sun goes over the horizon. So the Rambam seems to understand that perhaps the Bai was fundamentally held and you really, mitzvah of the Shema only really starts then. In which case, certainly our 6:30 minyan has a problem. Maybe our 7 o'clock minyan also has a problem, according to this, at least according to the Rambam. But the vast majority of the Rishonim do not rule like Rambam. They rule like the second understanding. Namely, that Abai was just saying that the Vatikin, the most Mahudra, the best way is if you're going to daven Nates, is to do it in this way, right before, so that you end Gal Yisrael as the sun goes up, and then you start your Amida with the sun. But strictly speaking, already from the time of what we call time Talit and Tefillin, which is also called Mishayakir, based on the Gemara we read, Mishayakir, from when you can recognize somebody, that is strictly speaking good enough. So let's look in source 5. They bring here the Rabbeinu Yonah, who clearly holds this as well. But Omar Mori Harav Naru, so my Rabbi Harav, this is Rabbeinu Yonah because this was actually written by his students. So when it says Mori Harav Naru, it means my Rabbi, meaning Rabbeinu Yonah said, She'afal pi, that even though Shehavatikin Hayukorin after Salafon Sachama, even though the people who did Vatikin, right, the Mahadrim people, they would read right before sunrise. Afilu hachi, even so, Modu they would agree, and Abaye would agree, Dizman hatchalat kriyata kodemhu. But the earliest time for reading Shema is before that. The halacha ka'acherim, the halacha fundamentally, like Rav Huna said, follows who? Follows acherim. She'amru, who said, Misha yir'et chavero berachok arba amot, when you can recognize somebody from 4 amot away, which is an earlier time than right before sunrise. The ha Rav Huna dehu batra pasak kavatai. Rav Huna, who was a later ruling, paskan that way. But Abaye nami hachisvirle, and he says Abaye also would agree to this. Shelo ba Abaye lachlok al hapsak sher pasak Rav Huna. Says Talmid Rabbeinu Yonah, Abaye was not disagreeing with Rav Huna. He was just telling you what the Mahadrim people did, the Vatikin. They would say Shema right before sunrise. And then they would start Amida with sunrise. But of course, strictly speaking, when is the correct time, the earliest time for Kriyat Shema? It's Mishayakir, which is known now on all the timetables as Zman Talit and Tefillin. Okay, which is in between dawn and sunrise, somewhere in the middle. Okay, you said 6:42, right? So it's all around then. Okay, which is why they only put on Talit and Tefillin after Ishtabach in the 6:30 minute or the 6:29 minute.
So that,
Okay,
that,
yeah, go for it.
That intermediate times, the time split between the two times, is that actually documented anywhere? Or is that something which has been as a compromised position? So someone said, "Oh, yeah, this is the time you can use," as opposed to being this is where you should or this is where you shouldn't. They're saying we'll do it in the middle to cover both grounds.
But it's not covering both grounds. That is Mishayakir.
Okay.
Mishayakir is between dawn, Alot Tashachar, which is dawn, when the first light goes over the horizon. The sun hasn't risen, but there's some light on the horizon, but not yet nates, that the sun itself has gone over the horizon. That's nate, sunrise.
It's not a case of you should and you shouldn't. It's a case of you should or you could.
Right. The earliest time that you can recite Shema in the morning is Mishayakir.
Yeah.
Now, is that strictly speaking true? Because we're going to see that in time of need that you might be able to recite Shema even earlier. But first, let's see in source 6 how the Shulchan Aruch rules in accordance with most Rishonim against the Rambam.
But tomorrow, for example, Alot HaShachar is 6:11.
Right. Alot HaShachar 6:11. Mishak is 6:42. 6:43 tomorrow. So the
Netzach is 7:35.
right.
Enough.
Right. So look at source 6 here. The Shulchan Aruch rules though that you can definitely. It doesn't rule like the Rambam. He says you can say from 6:43 tomorrow. Look at source 6. Zman kriyat shema shachrit. Time for reciting shachrit. Misha yir'et chaveiro haragil imo k'tzat. For somebody who's somewhat familiar with, he sees him. Barichuk dal amot from 4 amot away v'yakirenu and recognizes him. So he rules explicitly like Rav Huna, like Acherim, right? But the earliest time is 6:43 tomorrow. Mitzvah and hamuvchar, and it's just the best mitzvah. Likrota kavatikin. It's always best to read it like the Vatikin, who would always daven with nates. Shahayu mechuvanim likrota ma'at kodem hanet chama, would read it a little bit before sunrise. Kadesh yisayem kriyat shema uvrichotecha im hanet chama, so they would finish Shema and brachot with sunrise. And that way, v'yismoch hatfila miyad b'hanet chama. That tefillah would be juxtaposed to sunrise immediately. Okay. And by the way, what did he say about such a person? Somebody who's able to do this, that schar is great. So I really want a 7:15 million right now. Because if we do a 7:15 million, we're all davening nates. Because at 7:35, which is sunrise, you get to Amida, and then we'd be Vatikan. So that should be the plug, you know. But we'll do Vatikan. Problem is, it will move every day. Sorry. Sorry. Very good. Much later. Yeah, okay. Depends which day, yeah. Okay. So the Mishnah Brura explains here, what was this idea though of the Vatikin that they would read Shema right before Nates. So the Mishnah Brura points out here, something which we probably already we kind of realized ourselves right now. It wasn't because you have to read Shema right before sunrise. It's not a din in Shema, it's a din in Amida. Because Amida is supposed to be the ideal time to recite Amida is as the sun goes up. So this is a technical thing. It's not because of Kriyat Shema, it's just technically because when you read Shema right before Amida, and we want Amida to be right after sunrise, consequently, it must be that Shema is right before sunrise. So it's not because we're working backwards, exactly. It's not because fundamentally, according to the Vatican, there's something special about having Kriyat Shema right before sunrise. It's because there's something special about having Amida right after sunrise. So this is just what the Mishnah, we've just obviously proven this ourselves, but the Mishnah Brura says explicitly for us in source 7 here. Shahayu mechuvanim, says the Mishnah Brura, ki ikar mitzvah tefillah lechatchila hu me'eit hatchalat haneitz. The best time for davening shacharit is with the sunrise. Medichtiv, as it says, Yerucha im shemesh, right? They'll see you with the sun, or they'll feel you, sorry, with the sun. As it's clarified later on. And if they begin to read Shema of the page, Mishayaket Chaveiro, and if they were to read it from 6, right? When did we say Nate says tomorrow? 7:35. Yeah. So if you were to read Shema at the earliest time at 6:43 tomorrow, Mishayake, which is 6:43, then you've got almost an hour in between Shema and Amida. Haya harbeh, there'd be a long time, bein zeh hashiur uben haneitz, right? Between 6:43 tomorrow, which is the time of Mishayakir, and sunrise, which is at 7:35, you've got 52 minutes. So therefore, that's why they had to read Shema later. It just technically so that they had Amida on time. They'd have to wait achar kriyat Shema and to wait until the sun rose. And that would be another issue. They wouldn't have geula juxtaposed to Amida. Therefore, that's why they coordinated things to read Shema right before sunrise, and to finish Shema and its brachot with the sunrise. So that's what the Mishnah the Mishnah Berurah explains here. Almost okay. Beseder. Nonetheless, typically our minhag is not always we don't all daven nates, right? Especially on Shabbos, but throughout, but we will discuss nates and davening before nates soon in another shiur. But we don't typically, we're not typically concerned for the opinion of the Vatikin that we daven always carefully with nates, right? The Shulchan Aruch rules that it's a good thing to do, but not strictly speaking necessary. Look in source 8. Says the Shulchan Aruch, if one did not read Shema before sunrise, if you don't read it that early, it's fine. Read it as early as you can. So it's good to read Shema as early as you can. So far, all we've said is the earliest time for Shema is really Mishayakir. That's what we've said, right? 6:43. Time of putting on talit and tefillin as well. But if you didn't read it before nates, you can still read it afterwards. The earlier, the better. Now, going back to your question about, later minyanim and reading just Shema by itself, the Mishnah Berurah says that it's even if you want to read Shema early and Zrizim Makdimin and the mitzvot, those who are, Zrizin, who are, how do you say Zrizin? I don't know how to translate Zrizin. It's a good translation for Zrizin. Those are excited, those who are passionate. They arrive early for mitzvot. Nonetheless,
it's alacrity.
That's a very good translation. There we go. Okay. But now you have to go to good translation for Makdimin as well. Get up early or get early, right? So right, it's reason, right? So the idea of getting up early for mitzvot and being early, but this doesn't come in place of davening with a minyan. So if you can say Shema at 7:35 tomorrow, or you can go to an 8 o'clock minyan somewhere, better to wait, say Shema and daven with a minyan than it is to rush Shema early. Don't delay going to shul don't daven at home because you want to say Shema earlier than if you wait half an hour and say Shema on time with the minyan. So this is in source 9, says the Mishnah Berurah, lahaktim, dizrizim magdil mitzvot. They don't even translate it here. As one should perform a mitzvah as early as possible. Okay, I prefer your translation, Debbie. Okay. Umikol makom, nonetheless, ein sarich lehitpalel avrozeh beyechidi. You don't have to daven it on your own in order to read Shema earlier. Or likrot belot tefillin, or to recite Shema without tefillin. It's best to A, get tefillin, and B, with a minyan. This is obviously assuming that the minyan will get up to Shema by Sofsman Kriyat Shema, by the end of Kriyat Shema. And we haven't discussed when that time is yet. We'll discuss that in a moment. B'meheira, soon, says the following. Listen to this Mishnah Berurah here, and halfway through source 9. Mikan tochachat mogula livnei Ashkenaz. Here is an open rebuke to Ashkenazim. Shema achrim ma'od kriyat Shema, who we delay very much in reciting Shema. Right? Think about Shabbos morning, for example. When's kriyat Shema these days? According to the Gra, about 9:50 something. When is Shacharit? So we're really on the fence, right?
At 10 o'clock.
Around 10 o'clock, okay? But at 9:30 is so you have certainly throughout the winter, but even now in the summer, I always say Shema earlier before you come to shul. And if you wait for the last, so this is good tochacha, good rebuke to Ashkenazim who daven late apparently. But Amru Chazal, and Chazal said, "Il malei lo nivra ha'olam ela b'shvil kabbalat malchut shamayim dai." If the world had been created only for the purpose of accepting the yoke of heaven, that would have been enough. So, and the idea that we wait to the last possible moment to fix our minyanim, how do we work out when the late minyan can be? When Kriyat Shema is, right? So, and he says it's a terrible thing. So it's just a good piece of mussar here.
It's a good case for
It's a good case for cutting down Pesukah Zimra, or for going to Hashkama on Shabbos. or just moving. Listen, I thought we were late in England. I grew up going to a 9:15 minyan in England, but 9:30 is something else. But what can I say? Minhag avotenu biyadenu, right? Sorry, but you know what? For even England, 9:15, you still you miss Shema. 9:15 Shema is often 9:15, 9:30 in England. So I rarely said Shema, in shul. Yeah. So, the winter is often later. Because nature's later. We'll discuss that in a minute. Okay, so that was just a little bit of background about that. So we said really what the earliest time is Misha Yakir, right? Which is 6:43, the time of Talit and Tefillin. The question is there room to be lenient in a time of great need to recite Shema even earlier? So let's say, I don't know, like the 6:30 minyan, they wait, right? They only get to Yishtabach and Misha Yakir, so everyone can put on tefillin. But if somebody's really stuck, I know, in the army or there's or doctor, whatever it is, there's some pressing need, can one recite Shema even earlier? Can one recite Shema from Alot HaShachar, from dawn, which was 6:12, let's say right now? So half an hour before the time of Misha Yakir at the moment. Is there any room to be made in a time of need? So if we look in source 10 on page 249, we have here in the Rishonim, the opinion of Rabbeinu Yonah. In source 10, says Rabbeinu Yonah, "V'kodem lechem," before this time, before Misha Yakir, "ein lo likrot," you should not read Shema, "ela b'shad hadchat," only a time of great need, "shekore ota achar she'ala amut hashachar." Then you can read after Alot HaShachar, after dawn. So if, for whatever reason, somebody's stuck, there's room to allow them to read it in a time of great need, says Rabbeinu Yonah, after 6:12, right? What's the issue here? You can't really put on talit and tefillin then. So you'd have to recite Shema without talit and tefillin on. Because talit and tefillin you can only put on at 6:43, we said, which is Zman Misha Yakir. But b'shat tadchak, if one's got no choice, one can say Shema then. It's about a time of great need. And this Shulchan Aruch actually rules this way in a time of great need. Look in source 11. Mishu anus, somebody who is honest, right? Somebody who's forced due to the circumstances. Kagon, such as Shahaya Mashkim, let's say the derech, going on a journey, had to travel. B'makom gududei chayav v'listim, a place where the wild animals and the highway bandits. Shelo yuchal la'amod, he won't be able to stop on the way. V'lo lechaven, and he's so stressed about the journey, he won't be able to have kavana. Afilu parsh rishoni, even for the first paragraph. Afilu ad, even up to the words al levavecha in the middle of the first paragraph. Are you talking about really extraneous circumstances? That's what Shulchan Aruch's pointing out here, that you'd have no chance to say Shema a little bit later on. Or alternatively, shebnei hashayara holchim meheira, that the caravan, meaning the convoy that you're with, are going very quickly. They were not willing to wait with him at all. Then in such a necessary case, you may recite Shema early from Alot HaShachar. That's a time of great need. Why? Once the sun, not the sun's gone up, but once there's been first light, once it's dawn, Shapir Karinam Be Uvkumecha. We call that Uvkumecha, when you rise up. But Gam Shapir Nikra Yotze'ar is also considered Yotze'ar, God who creates light. Aval, but if you're not in a case where there's wild animals or bandits, or your convoy, your ferry, whatever it is, isn't in such a rush. Even if you're leaving after dawn, you should wait. So he's makel, the Shulchan Aruch allows it, but only in really, really tight circumstances does he allow this leniency. Okay, so we've seen clearly that the ideal is from Misha Yakir. This person is really stuck, then only then we'll allow it from even earlier, from Alot HaShachar, from dawn. But as I said, you wouldn't be doing it with talit and tefillin. So it's really a case of not ideal. We're just going to see that, and then I'll take your question. If we go to source 12, Mishnah Berurah gives other examples of the cases which is really considered an extenuating circumstance where you could read Shema extra early from dawn. He brings here in source 12, Anus, somebody who's forced. Behu hadin, the same would be the case, right? Somebody works for the Chevra Kaddish and there's a burial that they've got to take care of. O Mila, or they have to get to a Brit Mila, a circumcision to perform. O Yom Arava, or the Yom Arava, which we won't get into now. you have to read it earlier. Then yachol likrot mishalav mashachar. So times of great need, the Mishnah Berurah allows it. He gives a few other examples here. Mashkim gets up early. Peirush. This means she'ein lo pnai lahamtin ulitakev ad zman mishayireh. This is which is mishayakir, right? Meaning this is when somebody absolutely has no time to wait until 6:43. They absolutely have no time. Could go on Sachas, they've got to go out for travels. Who are doing the same thing would be true. Shar inyanim kayot in all other matters. She'ein lo pnai, when one does not have time, like the Torah writes. So again, really extenuating circumstances, but it's not the ideal. So what we're going to ask?
Are we still assuming that the reading of Shema is tied to Geula, which means that the readout is said immediately afterwards, or are we separating Shema?
The former. We're talking here about you say Shema and daven early.
And then you must
Right, we're
follow-
talking about somebody who's got no other chance to daven or stop for Shema or anything because they're scared on a very dangerous highway, not with cars, but they're walking or whatever it is, or on a donkey or whatever, or they're not going to wait for them. But this is really Shat Chak in the words of the Rebbeinu Yonah that we saw in the Rishonim, Shat Chak. But ideally, no, the earliest time is 6:43.
We're talking about Amidah as well.
Yes. That's what we're talking about, because we're talking about presumably where he's got no time until the Sofsman Kriyat Shema, which nowadays is around 10 o'clock. And he's going to have no time between now, 6:12, he has to read Shema now, 6:12, or he's going to miss till after 10. There's going to be no chance between 6:12 and 10 a.m. There's going to be no chance for him to read Shema. Okay. Let's look at the Mama Mordechai in Rav Mordechai Eliyahu here in source 13. He also says the same thing for Sfaradim. In source 13, Tchilat Zman Kriyat Shema, that the earliest time for reading Shema, Hu Ba'alot HaShachar, is dawn, right? 6:12. Va'asu Chazal Sayag, but Chazal made a safeguard, Amru, and they said what? Sheyikra Kriyat Shema Mizman Sheyachol Lirot Et Chavera Haragil Lemokza. The time you can recognize a friend, the Merchak Arba Amot Be'akar, somebody that you know a little bit, an acquaintance you can recognize from 4 Amot away. So this is really the universal thing. We always try and wait for Mishayakir, as I said, and only in time of great need do we do so. Otherwise, you have issues with Talit and Tefillin, as I said as well, and perhaps other issues as we've seen in the past. So it's really the earliest time for Shema is Mishayakir, which tomorrow is 6:40. Sorry? Tomorrow is around 6:43. Here, if you look on page 251 here, source 14, it's got Maizmanim. Maizmanim is an excellent website. It shows you here the differences. So if you look here, so you see here, let's try and explain what's going on here up on the screen as well. So sunrise, Nate's, is 7 right on this in New York, 7:20 a.m. on this particular day in January, right? Middle of winter in the Northern Hemisphere. When is the earliest Talit and Tefillin? So it depends how you work it out. So dawn, this is dawn. Remember, there are 2 ways to calculate dawn. Either it's 72 minutes or it's based on the degree of the sun on the horizon. So here, this is based on degrees, this calculation. So dawn, they worked out as 5:52 a.m. And Talit and Tefillin would be half an hour later, 6:25. So the earliest time for Shema would be 6:25. And only if somebody was really pressed, they would be able to read from 5:52, but they couldn't put on Talit and Tefillin yet. Right? If you look on the same day, not in America, but you look in Europe, it's much later because obviously the sun in Northern Europe rises much later, right? So sunrise, it's crazy. Sunrise in Antwerp in January is 8:46, believe it or not. Really late. And the earliest you can put on Talit and Tefillin is 7:36. The earliest. So the earliest you could say Shema is really 7:36. And only in a time of great need could you say it from dawn, which is 6:56. So it just goes to show you, living in Northern Europe, it was difficult. And you can understand these extenuating circumstances. If somebody had to go to work, they could only start Shema at 7:36, then they're really stuck. Right? There'd be no 6:30 million, because 6:30 is halachically night still. And dawn is only 6:56 in Antwerp in the middle of their winter. It just goes to show you the geographical effects of being, somewhere else in the world.
I guess it's probably outside the scope of this shiur, but how
Yeah.
do we get from Mishayakir to 10.2 degrees?
Masora and different things in terms of the 10.2 degrees is just based on the light as highlighted by the poskim. 16.1 degrees is basically the time highlighted by the Gra and others to say it's relative to do with the position of the sun, how far down below the horizon the sun goes. They're both below the horizon. But this is what Talia and Tefillin here is based on when the sun is slightly higher, still below the horizon. Only at sunrise does it appear over the horizon. Right. And this is, if you look at, I said, do I have a copy here? If you look at, if you look at Mizrahi matters, they don't use the calculation of the Gra. They use there's just 72 fixed minutes, which we saw is based on Shulchan Aruch and others. But you'll see on Sunday, it's a fast day. And I pointed this out when we started learning Zmanim a couple of months ago. When it's a fast day, they use the Zmanim based on relative, fixed degrees. So Sarich Ian. No, I did raise the point, but as I said, I'm just a Rosh Kollel, so it's not up to me. Okay, but just something to notice. Okay.
I think you'll find that some of the times there to be consistent were developed by Rabbi Mordechai Gutnick. So if you have a chat with him, you might be able
I mean, I don't need to have a chat with him. There's money in which they put as the Alot Shachar is based on the Psak of the Shulchan Aruch, and there's man based on when he declares the fast starts in Melbourne is based on the Psak of the Vilna Gaon and the Mishnah Berurah. So the two is inconsistent. I'm just saying that if we follow the Vilna Gaon and the Mishnah Berurah for when the fast day comes in, then we should also follow the Vilna Gaon and the Mishnah Berurah as to when every day, when it goes out, of course, but every day. When is Alot Shachar? Is it 72 minutes before Nate's fixed every day, whether it be summer or winter, or is it based on relative degrees like the Gra and the Mishnah Berurah? Sorry,
72 minutes is window minutes or as halachic?
No, regular minutes. Regular minutes. That's what they say. They say Sha'ava Chomesh, right? An hour and a fifth, 72 minutes.
Well, we've adopted the 72 minutes as a fixed thing. It's easier.
But so then will you bringing in the fast? This
well, that's inconsistent, of course.
But I said I don't know what we do with that.
Yeah.
As I said, I'm just the Rosh Beit Midrash, so I'll let you guys work it out. I'm just here to cause problems, not to solve them. Okay. Beseda. Okay, sorry. Okay, so that was regarding the earliest time to recite Shema. We established Mami Shayakir. It's 20 minutes to half an hour, depending on the time of year, after dawn, after the first light. When is the latest time to recite Shema? So let's look in source 15 here. This is again the Mishnah in source 15 here on page 252. It says the Mishnah in source 15 in Brachot. The Gomra, when must you finish Shema by? Gomra ad hanetz chama, you finish Shema at sunrise. That was one opinion. However, Rabbi Yeshua says ad shalosh sha'ot, by the third hour of the day. Shekain derech melachim, because that's the way of kings. La'amod b'shalosh sha'ot, they get up 3 hours into the day. Now, the vast majority of Rishonim understand this means shout zmaniot. What do I mean by shout zmaniot? Meaning halachic hours. Meaning you take, let's say, the amount of daylight there is, and you split it into 12. And then, so 3 of those hours, 3 hours after, 3 halachic hours after from the morning, right? So what does that show me? That means in the winter, the hours, shouts maniot are much shorter. And in the summer, they're much longer. I mean, they can get to an hour and a half, especially in England, an hour and a half, an hour 40. One sha'az manit could be an hour 40 in the summer. And in the winter, it can be like 40 minutes. Because it depends, you just the amount of sunlight you have, you split into 12. So 3 halachic hours after from the morning, basically. And look at the Rambam rules this way, like Rabbi Yeshua in source 16 says the Rambam Hilchot Shema, ve'ezahu zmanam bayom, when is the time for Shema? Mitzvata mishiyatchil likrot kodem Neit Chama, from before. The ideal is from before Neit. Ve'im echar, if he was late for kara achar sha'a al shemesh, if one were to read it after sunrise, yatsi de chavoto, one has fulfilled one's obligation. Why? She'onata ad sof shalot sha'ot bayom, because until the end of the third hour of the day, lemishav avar v'icher, somebody who was delayed. So again, the Rambam shows you it's not ideal according to him. Nonetheless, the Shulchan Aruch rules that, like Rabbi Yeshua, and he doesn't say it's a bad thing, unlike the Rambam seems to imply, really we should all be davening nates every single day. That's what the Rambam seems to imply. He says the Misha Avar v'icher, when he was over, transgressed, and waited. That's what the Rambam seems to imply. The Shulchan Aruch, I don't know if thankfully is the right word, but Shulchan Aruch doesn't, otherwise we'd have serious problems in Melbourne if we had to always daven nates, because the only minyan which davens after nates is the 7:30 minyan, so in the winter. And but the Shulchan Aruch doesn't seem to rule that way. If you look in source 17, the Shulchan Aruch is more lenient than the Rambam. He says, "V'nimshach zmana," and the time extends ad sof gimel sha'ot, until the end of 3 halachic hours, shehu raviyah hayom, a quarter of the day. Okay, so a quarter of the daytime. So the Shulchan Aruch doesn't seem to imply that he's so militant about it in the same way as the Rambam. The Rambam really, we should all be davening nates every day, and minyan which is later than nates is bad. But the Shulchan Aruch doesn't seem to say that way. He's much more lenient in his language. Question is, we said 3 hours, but there is a big machloket here. It's attributed to be typically a machloket. We call it between the Magen Avraham versus the Gra. The Magen Avraham versus the Gra, the Vilna Gaon, as to how you calculate the hours of the day. I said you take the daytime and you split it into 12, right? It's a big machloket as to what the beginning and end of the day is. According to the Magen Avraham, which is why we have two, often on your C's, Sof Zman Kriyat Shema, have in brackets Magen Avraham, and then it will have a later time, Sof Zman Kriyat Shema, have in brackets Gra. Because how do you work out the three? So a big machloket, and typically we say it's the Magen Avraham versus the Gra, which is how do you split up the day? The Magen Avraham says the day is from Alot HaShachar until Tzeita Kochavim, from first light, dawn, until dark, Motzi Shabbos times, basically. From dawn till dusk. That's how you split that into 12. Okay? The Gra, the Vilna Gaon, and others disagree. And the Gra says it's not from dawn, which is 6:12. It's from nates, sunrise, which is 7:35, until Shkia, until sunset. So his barriers are closer together, later and closer together.
Except
As a result, according to the Gra, according to the Vilna Gaon, Sof Zman is always later, a bit later, because he starts an hour and a half after the Magen Avraham. He starts counting his days.
then make proportionally also makes the night longer.
So the night would be longer according
And
to the right.
Shabbat halachiyot are different. There are daytime Shabbat and there are nighttime Shabbat.
Correct.
Because the day.
So where is the beginning and end of the day, and therefore the bookends for the night? So whereas the Magen Avraham says it's from dawn, 6:12, until dusk, till dark. For the Magen, for the Gra, it's later. It's from sunrise, 7:35, until Shkia, sunset, sunrise to sunset. In other words, according to the Magen Avraham, do we go by functionality? That's how in Lomdus I always look at the Chakira. Where's the Magen Avraham? You go by functionality. Is there light from first light till last light, from dawn to dusk? Whereas the Gra says, don't look at the light over the horizon. Look at the sun, from sunrise to sunset. When the sun arises over the horizon to when the sun disappears, right? As the song goes. Beautiful, Michael. So that's the question, okay? Typically, what do we do? It's a big machloket. Let's see it inside. We don't need to see source 18. We'll just skip over to source 19. The Magen Avraham says as follows in source 19 on page 255. Says the Magen Avraham, Shalosh Sha'ot, 3 hours. Near early, it seems to me, says the Magen Avraham, Tahacha, that here, Lekule Alma, everyone agrees, Manina, and we count, May Alot Tashacha, from dawn. And that's how he rules, and he tries to be medayik that from Tosfot. That is the opinion of Magen Avraham. The Gra, the Vilna Gaon, disagrees, and he really goes to town on this. Look in source 20, says the Gra, Aval ha'ever hu tamur ma'od. It's really astonishing, this Magen Avraham. Shkaga gadola hi ma'od. It's a terrible mistake. It's a terrible error. It's a great error. Because we say in Masechet Pesachim, the asar parsaot hu me'alot hashacha ad tzeit kochavim. There's 10 parsaot from dawn until dusk. V'im ken, and if that's so, Yud bet sha'ot bayom benoni lididei, on an average day, 12 hours from him would be me'alot hashacha ad tzeit kochavim. And he goes over the page, and we'll see as he explains further over the page on page 256. But Taud Gedolahu, it's a big mistake. Shekain katvu kol tochnim. All the astronomers wrote the Betukufat Nisan of Tukufat Tishrei, the period of Nisan and Tishrei, which is the middle of the year, i.e., spring and autumn. Shehain Yamim Beinonim, which are average days. Yud bet sha'ot minei tzachama ad hashkia. There are 12 exact hours from sunrise to sunset. But from dawn to dusk, which is what the Magen Avraham wanted to calculate, hutet vav sha'ot would be 15 hours. Says the Gra something very substantial. He says, what's the proof for me? If you take an average day in the year, which is the middle of the autumn, Nisan, or the middle of the or spring, or I say I've gone southern hemisphere now. Spring versus autumn. That's what the Chazal call Nisan and Tishrei. The spring equinox and the autumn equinox. If you were to look at them, what you would see would be 12 days of daylight and 12 hours of daylight and 12 hours of nighttime. According to me, that only works if you calculate from sunrise to sunset. There's 12 hours of sunrise and 12 hours of dark. But if you work according to the Magen Avraham, that you don't calculate the sun, you calculate by the first light and last light, dawn and dusk, then it doesn't work, because then it's 15 hours, he says. So the sort of the astronomy favors the Gra. And if you look in the bold in the next paragraph there, he says, V'ikar k'divrei ha'omrim, and the primary opinion is like those who say, that the calculation is from sunrise to sunset, you shouldn't change this. Strictly speaking, that's typically what we do. The science is kind of with the Gra, and many people are with the Gra against the Magen Avraham. And the Baal HaTanya also rules like him, right? So on Mai's money, they always write Gra and Baal HaTanya, because they're Chabadnikim.
Only two things they agree on.
The Chazon Ish, right? It's true. The Chazon Ish rules this way as well. Look at source 21. The Chazon Ish over the page says, Ein shum ta'am sheyachshavu et ha'sha'ot ma'alot ha'shachar. I might apologize. There's a high chance my computer might die in a moment, but we only have a couple minutes left, so I'm playing on. We're risking it now. Well, so I apologize if I disappear. Ein shum ta'am, there's no reason sheyachshavu et ha'sha'ot me'alot ha'shachar. It doesn't make sense to calculate from dawn. Bishvil shesman kriyat shema matchil me'alot ha'shachar. Just because the time starts from alot ha'shachar. Kivan shakavana l'hodia sof hazman. When Chazal talking about the end of time, you follow based on daytime hours. When you want to tell people 3 hours, how people function, you don't typically tell people 3 hours from first light. You tell them 3 hours from sunrise. That was a unit of time that the convention that people used. Following the sunrise. And therefore, says the Chazon Ish, we rule like the Gra. Practically speaking, what do? So typically, most of the poskim here, the contemporary ones, Moshe Feinstein and others, they all follow the opinion of the Gra. And that's how we calculate things, which gives us a bit more time for reciting Kriyat Shema, for example. So, for example, there's more room. Let's say if you have, Shachar is 9:30 on a Shabbat morning, then you may make it to Kriyat Shema, depending how slow or quick your minyan is. If, let's say, Sofsman Kriyat Shema is 10 o'clock going to the Gra, then you'll make it. Some people are machmir for de'oraitas, like Kriyat Shema is a mitzvah de'oraita, to be concerned with the opinion of the Magen Avraham. But the Igrot Moshe here, Moshe Feinstein, source 22 says there's no real need. Look in source 22, says Moshe Feinstein, but davar zman Kriyat Shema b'shachrit, hinei minhag rov makomot, the custom of most places, Shibinatenu in our country, Russia Velita, it was basically where he was from, Russia and Lithuania. V'chei minhag yeshivat, also even the minhag in yeshivat was, ad shaloshot minei tzachama, 3 hours from sunrise. Kashitat hagra v'hagraz, like the Gra and the Baal HaTanya, right? V'chein hu ha'ikil adina. Strictly speaking, that's the halacha. And he goes on to say, only those who are machmir are concerned for the opinion of the Magen Avraham, which is the earlier time. Now, this is what many Ashkenazim do. Some are machmir to say Shema early. The Sfardim, they prefer the Magen Avraham's times a little bit. And they say it's best, certainly for de'oraitas like Kriyat Shema, it's best to do say Shema earlier. So, for example, Mordechai Eliyahu in source 23 rules this way for Sfardim, and that was also the minhag in Yerushalayim as well. So, look in source 23. The Mama Mordechai Eliyahu, former, Sfardi chief rabbi of Israel, says in source 23, Chishuv hasha'ot hazmaniot hu achat misha'ot hayom chalkei shtemesrei. You divide into 12 sha'ot hayom, the hours of the day. Shemachashvim et hayom me'amud hashachar ad seta kochavim. So he doesn't rule like the Gra. He says from dawn till dusk. So he rules like the Magen Avraham. And Seta Kochavim, which he says either 13 minutes or 20 minutes after sunset. The Yeshmi says at the end of source 23, the Yeshmi shemachashev et hayom menei tzacham ad shkia. Some, like the Vilna Gaon, the Gra, say from sunrise to sunset. Achasvara Rishona Ikar. The first svara is more correct. V'chenu minhag Yerushalayim. That's the minhag of Jerusalem. Due to time, I won't read it inside, but Piskei Teshuvot in source 24 brings this middle opinion that maybe for the writers, we should be concerned for the Magen Avraham, which is the earlier time. Strictly speaking, the minhag does follow the Gra, and we saw that sort of the astronomy, if you like, of when is the middle of the year, 12 and 12 only works according to the Vilna Gaon, then it makes a lot of sense. And therefore, one who wants to be Samech on the Gra, even for the writers, certainly has what to rely on. But Sfaradim typically try to be Choshish for Magen Avraham throughout. And he brings Rav Avadia here, or sorry, his son, Rav Yitzchak Yosef in the next source, but just for time, we won't read that out. Read that out now. We'll just in case my computer dies, because I've got next week, unfortunately, I'm not here. I'm on RCB conference. So we will reconvene Bezrat Hashem in 2 weeks' time. Bezrat Hashem.
Pose that situation.
You may, and then we just got to run quickly to tomorrow next door. Yeah.
You're standing on something to the bridge.
Yeah.
Going down.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. What is sunset? Sunset is because there's refraction, isn't it?
Sunset is when the sun disappears. The sun itself, when the sun itself disappears. Not the light, not the rays, the sun itself.
Yeah, because when the sun is sitting on the
There's a
water-
big machloka as to how we calculate it.
I'm just trying to get it. If the sun is sitting on the water, it's already.
I did it yesterday. I saw the sun disappear. It disappears quite
It goes very
quickly.
quickly.
Yeah, but you got to. That's assuming that there's no buildings which are hiding it.
Nothing.
Assuming there's no buildings.
That's what I'm saying.
When the sun totally disappears on the horizon, that's Shkia, that's sunset.
Sunset.
Yeah.
And there's a glow in the side.
That glow is post Shkia, at least according to the Vilna Gaon.
Okay.
Okay, and you look next time you see it, you look on your phone on myzmanim.com, you check for Melbourne and you compare.
Okay, so that.
When the sun has totally gone below the horizon, the sun itself. Yeah, the sun itself. When the sun itself has totally disappeared from the plane. Yes, when you can't see the ball. Okay, and when it's actually gone, that is halachic sunset. We'll stop there and we'll continue Bezrat Hashem in 2 weeks.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.